The afternoon sun was warm and the streets of Los Angeles were calm. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying the sound of children laughing in the distance and the hum of cars passing by. It was one of those quiet days when everything seemed to move a little slower. Keanu Reeves, dressed simply in jeans and a dark jacket, was walking back from a small cafe where he'd just grabbed a cup of coffee. He liked walking alone when he could. No cameras, no rush, just the peace of blending into the city like any other person. As he turned the corner of a residential street, something caught his eye. Near the edge of a park, two small boys had set up a little stand made out of an old wooden crate. It wasn't fancy, but they had done their best to make it look nice. A hand-drawn sign leaned against the front, the letters written in uneven marker. "Toy car for sale, help our mom." Keanu slowed his steps. The boys looked about 8 years old, maybe twins. Their hair was a little messy, and their clothes looked worn but clean. They sat behind the crate talking quietly to each other, occasionally glancing up when someone walked by. Most people passed without stopping, a few giving them polite smiles before continuing on their way. The boys didn't seem discouraged, but there was a tired look in their eyes, the kind of tired that didn't belong on kids that young. Keanu watched them for a moment from across the street. He was used to seeing all kinds of people in LA, but there was something different here. Something about their small hands holding onto that little toy car made his heart tighten. He crossed the street slowly, sipping his coffee, not wanting to startle them. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice calm and friendly. "What are you guys selling?" Both boys looked up at him. One of them spoke first. "It's our car," he said, his tone serious as if this was a very important matter. "We're selling it." Keanu crouched down so he was at their level. "It looks like a cool car," he said with a small smile. The toy was an old red model car, slightly scratched but clearly loved. "How much are you selling it for?" The second twin, who had been quiet, looked at his brother before saying softly, $10. $10, huh?" Keanu said, nodding. "Mind if I ask why?" The first boy hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Our mom's sick," he said simply. "She needs medicine, but it's really expensive." The second one added quickly, "We don't have enough money, so we're selling this." Keanu looked at the car again and then at their faces. There was no sign of a scam, no adult nearby coaching them. Just two little boys trying to do something good in a world that wasn't being fair to them. He leaned his elbows on his knees. "That's a really kind thing you're doing for your mom," he said softly. "She must be very proud of you." The twins exchanged a glance. "We just want her to get better," the first one said. "She gets tired all the time now. The doctor said she needs medicine every day." Keanu nodded slowly, taking it in. His heart ached. He'd seen a lot in his life: fame, fortune, loss. But moments like this always reminded him what truly mattered. He didn't want to pry, but he also wanted to help. "So this car," he said, gesturing to it. "Where did you get it?" The second boy smiled faintly. "It was our dad's. He gave it to us before he went away." There was a short silence. The older twin continued, his voice quieter now. "He said it would bring us good luck." Keanu's chest tightened. He looked at the small car again, realizing it wasn't just a toy. It was a piece of their father, a memory they were willing to give up for their mother. That kind of love didn't come from greed or pity. It came from something pure. He glanced around. The street was still quiet, a few people walking dogs, a couple of kids playing basketball nearby. He looked back at the twins. "You really want to sell it?" The first boy nodded, but not very confidently. "We have to," he said. "Mom said she'll be okay, but we can tell she's not." Keanu smiled softly. "All right," he said, reaching for his wallet. "I think I'd like to buy your car." Their eyes lit up immediately. "Really?" the second twin asked. "Really?" Keanu said. "But you have to promise me something." They both leaned in, curious. "You have to promise me that you'll keep helping your mom," he said gently. "Keep doing your best for her, okay?" They nodded hard. "We promise," the first one said eagerly. Keanu reached into his wallet and pulled out a bill. He didn't show them what it was. He just folded it and handed it over. "Here you go," he said with a kind smile. $10 for the car." The boys' faces brightened with relief and excitement. "Thank you," they said together. One of them held out the toy car with both hands. Keanu accepted it carefully, almost reverently, as if it were something fragile and precious. He smiled at them one last time. "Take care of your mom," he said softly before standing and walking away. As he turned the corner, the twins looked at each other, still holding the folded bill. "Do you think that's really $10? One whispered. The other unfolded it, and their eyes went wide. But Keanu was already gone. He didn't look back. The little car sat in his hand as he walked down the street. It was scratched, the paint chipped in a few spots, but it carried a kind of quiet beauty. It reminded him of something, maybe his own past or the way love endures even when life gets hard. Keanu thought about how many people in this city walked past moments like that every day. Two kids sitting under the sun hoping someone would notice them. It was easy to pretend not to see, to stay wrapped up in your own world. But sometimes he believed stopping, even for a moment, could change everything. He remembered his own mother and the times when money was tight, how she worked multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. He remembered the kindness of strangers who helped when they didn't have to. Those memories stayed with him, shaping who he became. As he continued walking, the world around him seemed louder. The honk of a distant car, the chatter of people on phones, the buzz of life moving on. But inside, he felt quiet, peaceful. He stopped at a red light, looked down at the toy car again, and smiled. "You've done your job," he whispered to it. "Let's see what we can do next." A few blocks away, the twins ran home as fast as they could, the folded bill clutched tightly in their hands. Their mother was resting on the couch when they burst through the door, their voices overlapping with excitement. "Mom! Mom, a man bought our car!" She sat up surprised. "What? Who?" "He was really nice," one of them said, catching his breath. "He gave us $10. Well, maybe more." She took the bill from them and froze. Her hand trembled as she looked at the number printed on it. She blinked several times, not sure if her eyes were playing tricks on her. Her son stood beside her, waiting, smiling, unaware of what had just happened. Tears filled her eyes as she pulled them close, hugging them tightly. "Mom, what's wrong?" one asked. "Nothing," she said softly, her voice shaking. "Nothing's wrong, my loves. Everything's going to be okay." Back on the street, Keanu stopped by his parked motorcycle. He slipped the little toy car into his jacket pocket, zipped it up, and took one last look at the quiet neighborhood before starting the engine. To anyone else, it was just another day in the city. But for three people, everything had changed. Keanu didn't need cameras or interviews to tell this story. He didn't even need to tell anyone at all. He just hoped in his heart that the boy's mother would be all right. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, a toy car, a folded bill, a few kind words, could rewrite someone's day, or maybe even their life. And as he rode off toward the setting sun, the little red car pressed against his chest, he felt something warm inside him. Not pride, not pity, just quiet gratitude for a world that still had good hearts in it, and for the reminder that love, no matter how small, could still make miracles happen. The evening light faded softly through the window of a small apartment on the east side of the city. The twins' mother sat at the kitchen table, staring down at the folded bill her sons had handed her. Her eyes were still a little red from crying earlier. The number on the bill felt unreal. It wasn't $10. It was 10,000. Her hands trembled as she looked at it again, hoping she hadn't misread it. The edges were crisp and the ink clear. She turned it over, half expecting to find some kind of note or explanation, but there was nothing. Just that one bill. Her son sat across from her, watching closely. One of them finally asked, "Mom, is it enough for your medicine?" She looked up at them, her eyes soft but full of emotion. "It's more than enough," she whispered. It's a miracle." They smiled, relieved and proud that their plan had worked, even though they didn't fully understand what had just happened. To them, it was simple. A kind man had bought their toy car, and now their mom would get better. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep, she sat by the window and looked out at the city lights. The toy car was gone now, a small piece of their life that had meant so much. She thought about the stranger who had stopped that day, about his calm eyes and kind voice. He hadn't seemed rushed or distracted. He'd listened. He'd cared. She wondered who he was and why he had done it. Maybe he had been through something similar. Maybe he just saw two kids who reminded him of someone he'd lost. She didn't know. But what she did know was that there were still good people in the world. people who acted quietly without asking for anything in return. The next morning, she called the pharmacy and arranged to pick up her medicine. When she went to pay, she used part of the money, feeling an odd mix of relief and guilt. It felt strange to spend something given in such a mysterious way, but she knew she had to. Over the next few weeks, things slowly began to change. Her strength started returning, and she could smile again without forcing it. The twins noticed immediately. They laughed more, played more, and sometimes still talked about the man who bought their toy car. They called him the nice man. One evening, they were sitting on the couch together watching a movie. The boys were half asleep, their heads leaning on her shoulders. She looked at them and felt a deep gratitude she couldn't put into words. They had given up something precious, not knowing they'd get anything in return. Their love had brought kindness into their lives in a way she never expected. Across town, Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his home, holding that same little red toy car in his hand. It now rested on a shelf beside a few books and old photographs. Sometimes he found himself staring at it, thinking about the two boys. He hadn't told anyone what happened that day. Not his assistant, not his friends, not even his team. Some things, he believed, were meant to stay private. He'd grown used to stories about him spreading online. People often shared things he'd done, big or small. But this one felt different. It wasn't about fame or reputation. It was about something real, a moment that had reminded him why kindness mattered. Keanu had known loss, more than most people realized. He'd learned over the years that the smallest acts of care could ripple out in ways no one could predict. When he saw those boys that day, something inside him stirred. Maybe a memory, maybe a sense of duty. Whatever it was, he was glad he stopped. Days turned into weeks and life went on. One afternoon, while taking a quiet walk near the same park, Keanu noticed a familiar voice calling out. He turned and saw the twins playing with a group of kids near the swings. They looked healthier, happier. He smiled from a distance, not wanting to interrupt. Their mother sat on a bench nearby reading a small book. She looked peaceful now, the exhaustion gone from her face. Keanu stood for a moment, watching quietly before turning away. He didn't want them to feel they owed him anything. It wasn't about that. It never had been. That night, back at home, he wrote a short note and placed it in an envelope. There was no name, no return address, just a few simple words. Your kindness has already made a difference. Take care of each other. The next morning, he stopped by the park early before the families arrived and left the envelope on the same wooden crate the twins had used as their stand. The old sign was still there, faded now, leaning against a tree. He smiled at it and walked away. When the twins came to the park later that day, they found the envelope. They opened it together and read the note aloud. Their mother smiled softly as they handed it to her. She knew who it was from, though he hadn't signed his name. This world still has good people, she said quietly, holding the note close. For the twins, it felt like a message from a friend they'd never see again but would always remember. They didn't need to know his name to understand what he'd done for them. They just knew he cared. Meanwhile, the story of that small family's change in fortune began to spread, though not because of social media or gossip. It started with the pharmacist who had noticed the large payment made for the woman's medicine. She mentioned it to a nurse she knew, who told a friend who worked at a community paper. The story moved quietly through whispers, not as a headline, but as a reminder that small acts of kindness could still exist in a busy world. People who heard it didn't know the man's identity, but they didn't need to. The story itself was enough to make them think, about compassion, about paying attention, about helping when they could. One night, the twins' mother sat down with her sons at dinner. She told them, "When people do something kind for you, the best way to thank them is to do something kind for someone else." The boys nodded seriously. One of them asked, "Like how he helped us?" "Exactly," she said with a smile. "Kindness doesn't stop. It keeps going." Keanu never heard that conversation, but if he had, he would have smiled, because that was exactly what he believed, that good things didn't need to be loud or public to be powerful. Weeks later, during an interview for a new film, a journalist asked him an unexpected question. She said, "People say you're one of the kindest actors in Hollywood. How do you stay so grounded?" He paused for a moment, then smiled thoughtfully. "I just try to remember that everyone's fighting a battle you can't see," he said. "And sometimes just stopping to care, even a little, can mean the world to someone. He didn't mention the twins, the toy car, or the envelope. He didn't need to. Some stories were meant to stay between hearts. That night he returned home and looked again at the toy car on his shelf. He picked it up and rolled it gently across the table. It made a small soft sound, the wheels still turning smoothly. He thought about the hands that had once held it, the laughter of the boys and the relief in their mother's eyes. In that moment, the world felt a little bit smaller, a little bit kinder. He placed the car back on the shelf and turned off the light. Across town, the twins lay in bed talking softly before falling asleep. One of them said, "Do you think we'll ever see him again?" "Maybe," the other replied. "But even if we don't, he's like our hero." Their mother listened from the hallway, smiling through quiet tears. Outside, the city buzzed with life, lights glowing in the windows, cars passing, laughter echoing in the distance. But inside those few homes, something invisible connected them. A thread of kindness that had started with a small act and had grown into something lasting. Sometimes, the world felt heavy. But moments like this, and quiet human full of heart, reminded everyone that hope didn't have to be big to be real. It just had to be true, and somewhere as the night deepened, a man known by millions sat alone with a small red car, grateful that a simple choice on an ordinary day had brought light into someone's life. And, in a quiet way, into his own. The next morning began quietly, just like any other day. The sky was soft and pale, with sunlight creeping through the thin curtains of a small apartment. The twins were still asleep, curled up beside each other under a warm blanket. Their mother stood by the window holding a cup of tea in both hands, watching the city wake up. The sounds of cars and distant voices rose slowly from the street below. She still thought about the man who had helped them. Every morning she found herself wondering if he ever thought of them too. Sometimes, she caught herself glancing toward the park when she passed by, half hoping she might see him again, but weeks had gone by and there had been no sign of him. Still, she smiled whenever she remembered his kind eyes and gentle voice. She turned back toward her boys who were now stirring awake. They stretched and yawned, their sleepy faces lighting up as they saw her smiling. "Good morning," she said softly. "Breakfast's almost ready." As they ate, one of the twins asked, "Mom, do you think we'll ever meet the nice man again?" She paused for a moment before replying. "Maybe," she said. "But even if we don't, he's already given us something more important than money." "What's that?" the other twin asked, chewing on a piece of toast. "Hope," she said. "He reminded us that people still care." The boys nodded, not fully understanding but feeling comforted anyway. Across the city, Keanu was sitting in his living room, staring at the small red toy car on the shelf. The morning light caught the edges of it, making the old paint shine faintly. He reached for it and turned it over in his hand, running his thumb along one of the tiny scratches on its roof. It was strange how something so small could carry such a big story. He had thought about the twins often since that day. Whenever he passed a toy store or saw kids playing on the sidewalk, their faces came to mind. He wondered how they were doing, if their mother was recovering, if the family was okay. He didn't want to interfere, but a quiet part of him wanted to know. That afternoon, he decided to take a walk through the same neighborhood again. It was something he did from time to time. Not because he wanted attention, but because walking made him feel grounded. The world slowed down when he walked. As he neared the park, he saw something that made him stop for a moment. The old wooden crate was still there, this time pushed to the side under a tree. The faded cardboard sign was gone, but the crate was the same. A few kids were playing nearby, their laughter filling the air. It made him smile. He sat on a bench not far from where the twins had once sat. The park looked peaceful, the grass greener now after a few weeks of rain, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. He took a deep breath, feeling the calm around him. After a few minutes, he noticed a familiar voice calling out. He turned his head and saw the twins again, running toward the swings. They looked healthier now, their clothes brighter, their steps lighter. Their mother followed behind slowly, carrying a small bag of snacks. Keanu's lips curved into a quiet smile. They didn't see him. He was just another person sitting on a bench, and that was how he wanted it to be. He stayed there for a while, watching them from a distance. The boys pushed each other on the swings, laughing so loudly that a few people turned to look. Their mother sat nearby reading a book, occasionally glancing up to make sure they were safe. She looked stronger now, her face fuller, her movements easier. Seeing them happy filled Keanu's heart with peace. It was enough just to know they were okay. As he sat there, a small girl from another family dropped her ice cream cone on the ground and started crying. Before her parents could react, one of the twins ran over and handed her the rest of his own ice cream. The girl stopped crying instantly, smiling as she took it. Keanu watched that simple moment unfold, his eyes softening. He could see it clearly. The kindness had already passed on. The twins didn't even hesitate to help. It was natural to them now, like breathing. After a while, Keanu stood and began walking away quietly, blending back into the crowd. He didn't want them to notice him. He preferred moments like this to stay unspoken. That night, he returned home and sat by the window. The city lights glowed below, endless and bright. He placed the toy car on the table and just looked at it. Then he picked up a small notepad and started writing. He wrote about the twins, not their names, not their faces, just what they represented. Two children who had reminded him of the good that still existed in the world. He wrote about how their small act of love had touched him deeply. He wrote about how true kindness never asked to be seen. When he finished, he closed the notebook and placed it beside the toy car. He didn't plan to publish it or share it. It was just for himself, a reminder that fame and success meant nothing without empathy. Days passed. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. A nurse at a local clinic shared a story on social media. It was about a mother whose medical bills had been paid by an anonymous donor. The post didn't mention names or details, just a simple reflection about how small acts of kindness could change lives. She wrote, "Sometimes angels don't have wings. Sometimes they just stop and listen." The post started spreading quietly. People shared it with comments like "Faith in humanity restored" and "We need more stories like this." Within days, it reached thousands of people. Someone added that the family had once sold a toy car to help their mother, and that a kind stranger had bought it for a surprising amount. That small detail made the story even more powerful. Keanu saw the post one night while scrolling on his phone. He froze when he read it, then smiled faintly. He hadn't expected anyone to know. He hadn't wanted anyone to. But seeing people react with warmth and hope made him realize that maybe the story could help others believe in goodness again. He didn't comment or like the post. He just put his phone down, leaned back, and let out a soft sigh. Sometimes life had a way of letting the truth find its way out, even when you tried to keep it hidden. The next morning, the twins' mother found out about the post too. A neighbor had sent it to her saying, "This sounds like your story." She read it slowly, smiling. Her sons gathered around her, reading over her shoulder. "That's about us," one of them said excitedly. She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Yes," she whispered, "but it's not just about us. It's about everyone who believes in kindness." She thought for a moment, then said, "Let's not tell anyone his name. Let's keep it special just between us," the twins agreed. Some things they knew now didn't need to be shared. That evening, as the sun went down, she and her sons went back to the park with 3 small sandwiches and a bottle of water. They placed them on the old wooden crate where the sign used to be. "For anyone who needs it," one of the twins said softly. It wasn't much, but it was their way of keeping the kindness alive. A few hours later, Keanu passed through the park again on his way home. He noticed the sandwiches and the water sitting neatly on the crate. A small note beside them read, "If you're hungry, take one." He smiled quietly. He didn't need to guess who had left them. He stood there for a moment watching the wind move the edges of the paper. Then he whispered under his breath, "Good job, boys." He didn't take a sandwich, but he felt full just seeing them there. As he walked away, the streetlights began to glow, one by one. The world looked the same as always, but to him it felt different, lighter somehow. The air felt softer, the city warmer. That night, when he returned home, he placed the little red car back on its shelf and turned off the light. The story wasn't over yet. It was just beginning to ripple through the hearts of others quietly and beautifully, just the way kindness should. The days turned cooler as autumn crept into the city. The trees in the park began to change color, their golden leaves scattering across the grass like small pieces of sunshine. The air carried that soft chill that made people pull their jackets tighter and walk a little faster. But for the twins and their mother, life finally felt calm. Each morning they walked together to the school bus stop. The twins carried their backpacks, joking and laughing as they waited for the bus. Their mother stood nearby, smiling at how much brighter they seemed now. The past few months had been hard, but things were getting better, slowly, gently, like the first light after a long night. She had returned to her part-time job at the local bakery. The smell of fresh bread and pastries filled the shop every morning, and customers greeted her with warmth. Some of them had even heard about the kindness that had changed her life, though they didn't know it was her. She preferred it that way. She didn't want pity or attention. She just wanted to move forward, quietly and gratefully. At home, she kept the note that the man had left, the one that said, "Your kindness has already made a difference." She had folded it neatly and placed it inside a small box where she kept a few precious things. Whenever she felt tired or unsure, she opened the box, read those words, and reminded herself that there was still goodness in the world. The twins never forgot him either. Sometimes, when they played with their friends in the park, they would look toward the benches and wonder if he might appear again. "Maybe he's busy," one of them would say. "Maybe he's helping someone else right now." And in a way, they were right. Across town, Keanu sat in a quiet cafe, reading a small notebook. The toy car rested in his jacket pocket, as it often did when he went out. He had kept it close ever since that day, not as a trophy or reminder of generosity, but as a symbol of what really mattered: empathy, love, and connection. He had read the story about the family that had gone viral weeks earlier. It still amazed him how something so small could reach so many hearts. People from all over the world were commenting on it. Strangers writing things like, "I needed this today," or "This gives me hope again." Keanu had spent years in Hollywood, where most stories were built on scripts and screens. But this one and this quiet human story was real. That was what made it beautiful. He finished his coffee and left a generous tip on the table before stepping outside. The sky was gray, but soft light peeked through the clouds. He pulled his jacket closer and started walking toward the hospital nearby. There was something he needed to do, not for fame, not for attention, but because his heart told him to. He had asked one of his friends, who worked in the medical field, to help him find out if the twins' mother still needed support for her treatment. He hadn't told them why he was asking, only that it was important. When he reached the hospital, he went to the billing office quietly, wearing a baseball cap to stay low-key. He spoke softly to the clerk behind the counter. "Hi," he said. "I'd like to help cover any remaining costs for a patient." The woman behind the desk looked up, a little surprised. "Do you know the patient's name, sir?" He nodded and handed her a small note with the details. She checked the system, typing quickly, then paused. "Actually," she said, smiling, "her balance is already at 0. It was paid in full a few weeks ago. But she's due for another treatment next month." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's make sure she's covered for that too," he said, handing over his card. The woman blinked, clearly recognizing him now. "Wait, are you?" He smiled gently and shook his head. "Let's keep this between us, all right?" She nodded, still wide-eyed but moved. "Of course," she whispered. "You're a good man." He just smiled again, signed a few papers, and left quietly. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees along the hospital walkway. He slipped his hands into his pockets and looked up at the sky. It felt lighter somehow, as if the universe itself had smiled back at him. That evening, the twins' mother received a phone call from the hospital. The nurse told her that her next round of treatment had already been paid for by an anonymous donor. She sat down, her heart beating fast. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," the nurse said warmly. "You don't have to worry about anything. Just focus on getting better." After hanging up, she sat there for a long time in silence. Then she looked at the small box where she kept the note. She opened it, read the words again, and whispered softly, "Thank you." The twins noticed her wiping her eyes when they came into the room. "Mom, are you okay?" one of them asked. She smiled, brushing away a tear. "I'm better than okay," she said. "Someone's still looking out for us." Later that night, she and her sons went to the park again. The city lights glowed softly around them, and the air smelled like rain. They sat on the same bench where the twins had once waited with their toy car. The park was quiet except for the sound of leaves brushing against the pavement. She looked up at the sky and said softly, Wherever you are, thank you. Her sons followed her gaze, not saying anything, but they smiled too. Across the city, Keanu sat on his balcony, sipping tea and watching the night sky. The lights below shimmered like tiny stars, and the streets were alive with people moving through their own stories. He thought about how many lives were connected in ways no one could see. Sometimes, the smallest choices, stopping to talk, offering a hand, sharing a smile, could create ripples that reached far beyond that moment. He leaned back in his chair, the toy car resting beside him on the table. The city buzzed softly in the distance, and a faint smile touched his lips. He didn't need to meet them again. He didn't need to say anything. He just wanted them to be happy. Over the next few weeks, the story of the mysterious donor began to circulate again. The hospital staff spoke about it quietly, impressed by the generosity. One nurse mentioned to another that she'd recognized the man from somewhere, but she wasn't sure. Still, no one confirmed anything. It remained a mystery, just as he wanted it. One evening, as Keanu left the hospital parking lot, an older man who worked as a security guard called out, "Hey, you dropped this," and handed him a small folded piece of paper that had slipped from his pocket. Keanu thanked him, unfolded it, and smiled. It was a simple receipt, the hospital's confirmation of the donation. But written at the bottom in small handwriting were the words, "Kindness always finds its way home." He didn't know who had written it. Maybe the clerk, maybe someone else who'd recognized him, but it made him smile deeply. That night, as the rain began to fall gently over the city, he sat by the window again, the toy car on the sill, the sound of raindrops tapping softly against the glass. He thought about how far one small act of love had traveled, from two little boys sitting on a curb to countless people who had heard their story and felt hope again. It wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. It was about what that moment had created, a reminder that even in a busy, noisy world, kindness still mattered. As the night grew darker, he whispered softly to himself, "If they're happy, that's enough." And somewhere across town, in a small apartment filled with laughter and light, the twins and their mother were thinking the same thing, that whoever that man was, he had given them far more than help. He had given them faith again. The rain kept falling, washing the city clean, as if the world itself was taking a deep breath, ready for a new day, a new chance to be kind and to care quietly, just like he always had. The days passed quietly, and life slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. The city was alive again with movement. Children running to school, people hurrying to work, and the sound of buses echoing down the streets. But for one small family, the world felt completely new. The twins' mother was getting stronger every week. Her face no longer looked tired, and her smile came easily now. She moved through her days with calm gratitude, always remembering how far they had come. Every time she looked at her sons, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The twins were growing fast, full of energy and ideas. They were no longer the quiet boys sitting on a corner with a cardboard sign. They were cheerful, curious, and full of life. Sometimes they still talked about the kind man who had helped them. To them, he had become more than just a stranger. He was a part of their story. "Mom," one of them asked one evening, "do you think we'll ever be able to thank him properly?" She smiled softly and said, "The best way to thank someone like him is to live kindly." That's what he would want. The boys nodded thoughtfully. "Then we'll do that," one of them said. "We'll help people too." They didn't know it. But the man who had changed their lives was thinking about them too. Far across the city, Keanu sat in his living room one night, looking at the small red toy car on the table. The city lights flickered outside the window and a quiet song played softly in the background. He picked up the toy, turning it over in his hand, the metal cool against his fingers. It had been months since that day, but the memory was still vivid. Two little boys, a wooden crate, a cardboard sign, and a small act of courage that had touched his heart. He had carried that moment with him, and it had changed something inside him. He often thought about how easy it was to walk past someone's story without noticing it. People rushed everywhere, into jobs, meetings, and screens, forgetting that sometimes the most meaningful moments came when you stopped for a second and simply saw someone. That day had reminded him of that truth. He smiled faintly, setting the toy car back on the shelf. It sat there beside a small framed photograph. One of his late friends who had once told him, "Real kindness never needs an audience." Those words had stayed with him. The following week, Keanu was on set filming a new project. The production team was large, and people were busy running around with cameras and lights. But even in that chaos, he stayed the same, quiet, patient, and kind to everyone. He helped move equipment, shared snacks with the crew, and took time to talk to the extras. One afternoon, during a break, a young crew member nervously approached him. "Sir," she said, "I just wanted to say, that story that went viral about the toy car and the family, it really helped me." Keanu looked at her, surprised but calm. "Oh?" he said softly. "Yeah," she continued. "It reminded me that not everyone's out for themselves. It made me want to do something kind, too." He smiled gently. "That's good," he said. "That's how kindness works. It keeps going." The young woman smiled back, a little emotional, and walked away. He didn't tell her the truth, that the story was about him. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the story had done what it needed to do. It had reached someone else's heart. Later that night, after filming ended, he sat alone in his trailer, the city lights twinkling outside. He thought about the family again. He wondered if the boys were still playing in that park, if their mother was still smiling. He hoped they were all doing well. Then he reached for his notebook, the same one where he had written about them months ago. He turned to a fresh page and wrote a single line. "Sometimes, when you give a little love, it finds its way back to you." He closed the book and leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of peace that only truth could bring. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the twins' lives continued to bloom. Their mother had started volunteering at a local community center, helping other families who were struggling. She didn't tell anyone about her past, but she understood what they were going through. The fear, the worry, the exhaustion. One afternoon, she organized a small toy drive at the center. The twins helped her set up tables, sort through donations, and hand out gifts to children. At one point, one of the boys picked up a small toy car from the pile. It was blue, shiny, and new. He held it up and said, "This reminds me of our old car." His brother smiled. "Yeah, but this time we get to give it away." Their mother looked at them, her heart full. She realized that the kindness they had once received was now growing inside them, shaping who they were becoming. When the toy drive ended, the family walked home under the evening sky. The air was cool, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement. The boys walked ahead, talking excitedly about school and their new friends. Their mother followed behind, her steps light. At that very moment, somewhere across town, Keanu was leaving a charity event. He had quietly donated to a children's fund, not for publicity, just because it felt right. As he walked to his car, a reporter tried to ask him about his generosity, but he just smiled and said, "I just believe in doing what you can. That's all." Later that night, as he drove home, the city streets seemed quieter than usual. The rain had stopped, and the reflections on the road shimmered like liquid gold under the streetlights. He turned a corner and found himself near the same park where it had all begun. He parked his car and stepped out, walking slowly toward the bench. The wooden crate was gone now, but the spot still felt familiar. The swings creaked gently in the wind. He sat down, hands in his pockets, and looked around. A few families were still out, kids laughing, parents talking. Life moved on. But this little park held a story that only he and a few others truly knew. He smiled quietly, thinking about how something as small as a toy car could connect so many hearts. After a few minutes, he stood up to leave. As he walked toward the path, he noticed something lying on the ground, a small folded piece of paper weighed down by a pebble. He picked it up and opened it. Inside, written in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for helping us. We'll keep helping others now." He stood there for a moment, his eyes soft, his lips curving into the smallest smile. Then he folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket beside the toy car. He whispered softly, "You already are." The night air was cool, and the stars glimmered faintly above the city. He walked back to his car, feeling the kind of peace that words couldn't describe. As he drove away, he glanced once more at the park through his rearview mirror. The lights blurred into gold streaks, and the world around him looked quiet, beautiful, and kind. At home, he placed the note beside the toy car on the shelf. Together, they looked simple, but to him they meant everything. Proof that compassion didn't need to be big or loud. It just needed to be real. He sat back watching the city lights flicker through the window. For a long time he stayed there, lost in thought, until sleep finally came. Somewhere out there, two little boys were dreaming too. Dreams filled with laughter, hope, and the promise that kindness always comes back even when you least expect it. And as the city slept, a quiet truth lingered in the air. Sometimes the smallest act of love can change everything, not just for one family, not just for one day, but for everyone who hears the story and decides to be kind too, because kindness never ends. It travels and from heart to heart, hand to hand, lighting up the world one small act at a time.